ask anyone what their favorite Super Nintendo games are, chances are they'll likely say the same set of games. Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Kirby Superstar, Yoshi's Island, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, F-Zero, you name it. The younger, bigger gray and purple rectangle brother of the NES was loved and cherished for not only being a great console, but for also having a great lineup of games. Some games, however, aren't so lucky. Some either became obscure, aged poorly, or just aren't good. Bomberman had his slice of the 16-bit pie, with 5 whole games being under the Super Bomberman title, 2 if you count spin-off, and a few more that were made after the Super Nintendo became obsolete, pretty much being released on modern consoles, while you're still having the Super Bomberman title. But for whatever reason, people don't really talk about the ones on SNES. I know a few have talked about them over the years, but not a lot. So today I'm gonna look at all of the Super Bomberman games to see whether or not they're worth playing or even talking about. First off, Super Bomberman, released in Japan on April 28th, 1993. See, I told you it makes sense for Bombermonth to be in April. In North America on September 1993, and in Europe on the 20th of September 1993. The Japanese version has a short introductory play before any other demo contained in a film reel. Said intro is about the evil Carrot Diamond and his cohort, scientist Dr. Mook. They are holding a robot tournament with robots specifically designed for their combat and offensive capabilities. Hoping to steal White Bomber's advanced combat capabilities, Diamond has created a fake bomber to go to Peacetown and kidnap the real Bomberman. Aware of Diamond's plot, Black Bomber heads out alone, but ends up defeated. Not only that, but his castle has been taken over. Somehow, Black Bomber manages to escape and seeks White Bomber for help. White Bomber is also made aware of Diamond's evil plan. It is up to White Bomber and Black, if you're doing co-op, to put a stop to this. The graphics are really similar to the ones in Bomberman on the TurboGrafx 16, with slight modifications given to the graphics. The game itself is pretty much Bomberman, but each world has a total of 6 stages, each 7 levels, and bosses being the 8 stages. Bosses are usually a whole lot bigger than you, but it's no biggie since unless you suck at timing, they're not that hard. Except for 4-8. Oh my god! The amount of times I died to this is insane. I might have died to the other ones a few times, but not as much as in 4-8. First of all, he always seems to move in a randomly generated pattern. Then he always seems to go to you. 2 problems combined into this frustration. But he's not the only thing that frustrates me. The enemies in this one seem more trollish than usual. Some go to walls, some always go to you, and some run away from you. I hate these blue Pac-Man knockoffs. No matter the distance, if you place a bomb, he'll go out of its way to eat it. Speaking of which, power-ups are here and they do the usual of enhancing White Bomber. My 2 favorites are Power Glove and Remote Bomb. The former lets you punch bombs away from you, while the latter lets you detonate bombs at your preferred time. Although I will say, the time works weird in this one. Normally it's numbers counting down, but in this game, it's a bunch of bars. If it reaches the clock, it means that you die on the spot. A little odd, but that rarely happened to me. The music is also not too savvy. It's energetic and very funky, just like how I like my Bomberman music, my personal favorite being from World 2. Oh my god, it's so good. A problem I have is with the exit. Most of the time you'll be able to find it even before killing all the enemies. But there are those moments where you're destroying every soft block looking for the exit after killing all the enemies. It can get really annoying. There's one thing I can't forget about. It's the multiplayer. It's a very fun and chaotic session of setting off bombs onto each other, or self-kill and play poorly. Overall, Super Bomberman is a good time. It may have a few hiccups and frustrations, but it's still a solid game. That being said though, does Super Bomberman 2 blow the first one out by a mile?
Man, that thing has got to frighten some children.
Released on the April 28th, 1994 in Japan and February 23 a year later everywhere else, this is the last Super Bomberman Americans got until Super Bomberman R, but we're not there yet. As for the story, 5 evil androids, only known as the 5 Dastardly Bombers, sounds like a Hanna-Barbera villain group, wants to take over the universe, but before they can do that, they capture White Bomber and prison him in their space station. Can White Bomber escape and tear down the space station from the inside? Seeing as how I'm reviewing this, yes. Although the Japanese version came with a manga telling of that story, that's what I assume anyway, but even if I can't read it because of language barrier, this is still such a cool oddity that I wasn't even aware of until this very video. Onto the game. The controls have been made a lot more smoother, and this time the levels has been given level scrolling and increased in size, but not too big to the point of boredom like in Ocarina of Time. Yeah, I said it. The goal remains mostly the same, except you don't find the exit, you activate it, thankfully eliminating the tedious search from the first game. The enemies have been thankfully toned down to not be as mean or cheap as last time. Remember the weird timer from the first game? It's been changed back to numbers, thank God. The power-ups return along with a few new ones, but for the first time, stages have gimmicks like a metal magnet that brings bombs to it, hot spots that brings the exclusive fire from the bombs to the max, furnaces that puts a deadly zap to the electrical line if a bomb is placed, cannons and trampolines, lights, allowing for way more possibilities. I mentioned the new power-ups earlier, and the power glove has been ditched in favor of the pickup power-up. They pretty much function the same, but the pickup is quicker to use, so I'm not too bummed out. Along with that, there are powerful variants of bombs like the spiked ones or the jello bombs. Now bosses have two forms. The first one is generally a one-on-one, except the enemy has strong bomb blasts and are on acid. Yeah, if you thought the enemies from the first one were jerks, you sir, madam, or mix have not faced the bosses in this game. And the weird thing is they can be jerks and sometimes they can be huge idiots. The second phases are more reminiscent of the bosses in the first game, where with each of them it goes from 0 to 100 to 7 onwards. Yeah, I forgot to mention that there's only 5 worlds with 7 stages, are really tough. The music is more electronic based. I might prefer the music in the first Super Bomberman, but 2 still has a few great tunes. Or this one. And lastly, the multiplayer is back, only in battle mode. Originally co-op and even 4-player was planned for the story mode, but the only remaining thing that proves this was the case are these sprites for the ending. But as for the battle mode that ended up in the game, it's more insanity and it's even better. In conclusion, Super Bomberman 2 is better in every single way, minus the boss difficulty. But that's so minor that the rest of the game makes up for it. Up next, we have the third one, Super Bomberman 3, released on the 28th April 1995 in Japan and October 1995 in Europe. Americans were pretty much screwed over, and it's not too long for Europeans because just like how for a while 2 was the last one released in the US, 3 is the last one released in Europe until, again, Super Bomberman R. But we are not there yet. The story starts off right where we left off as the dastardly bombers end up on Earth after their defeat in Super Bomberman 2, albeit not in the best shape. A UFO comes and abducts them. The new alien Bagu revives and sends them to 5 planets where each of them steal and dismantle the mother computer chip that each planet had and scatter the pieces across the land, powering down the network. My question is, why couldn't they just scatter it all across the universe? But anyway, it's now once again up to White Bomber and Black, if you're doing co-op, to put a stop to this. Super Bomberman 3 changes up the graphics slightly, removing the pink border around White Bomber's face. Think of it like Link's pink hair. It's odd and you do get used to it, but it's not something I'm going to miss. Not only did they improve the graphics, but they also added a lot of pretty cool touches that gives life that we haven't seen before. Look at how White Bomber is skipping when left idle. Look at how he panics when near a bomb. Look at how he celebrates victory. touches like that is why this one has always been my favorite. Another new addition is Louis. There's 5 kinds and each of them have their special move. Admittedly, I'm not very good at keeping them for longer than 25 seconds, but that is still really cool and it gives them a ton of variety, but also an extra crutch that's not necessary to beat the level, but it can be very helpful. The bosses are still hard, but they aren't impossible. They always seem to have a pattern, and admittedly it can be hard to catch on at first. Once you do kick them to the curb, however, man is it satisfying. Stage gimmicks return, like the increased fire to the bomb in the second world, for example, although admittedly that one did get to me. The enemies again seem trollish, but it's thankfully toned down a little. Although the level scrolling from 2 isn't here, it might disappoint a few, but I'm not too bothered. The music is actually a mix between 1's natural instrument sound and 2's electronic. It's really great. And finally, the multiplayer. We can finally pick more than one character. The places are different countries represented by some of the levels of the single player mode, and with the addition of Louis, things are a lot more fun. So in conclusion, I still love this game. It might be my bias, but it's still my favorite. Super Bomberman 4 was the first one of the Super Bomberman games, only released in Japan on April 26, 1996. Oh my god, that's my birthday! It's my birthday! It came out on my birthday! The story this time is that White Bomber and co are navigating through space, when suddenly Bagura's brain, now in the mech. How can a brain make a mech? It's just a brain unless this was a backup, in which case how did he know the only body parts he will survive on is the brain? Anyway, he not only summoned a bunch of Bomber Kings to get sweet revenge, but he also sent White Bomber and co back in time.
Back to the past samurai jack. Back to the past samurai jack. Back to the past samurai jack.
Sorry, I love doing that. In my Bomberman arcade games video, I mentioned the similarities between this game and Neo Bomberman and how I ultimately preferred this game's graphics. While I still stand by that, comparing the graphics from this one to the previous Super Bomberman games shows how much was worse here in my opinion. They chose to have the characters have shading, and the colors are a lot more dull. But not only did the previous games not look as tacked on, but they also had animations that weren't just 2 frames, which is what they did for 4. The Louis don't return, instead they are these brand new rideable creatures that might as well be a sprite swap of Louis. The game also relied a lot more on RNG from the enemies, and it's noticeable in the normal stages, but especially noticeable in the bosses. You know what that means? Challenge is thrown out the window, and now it's just pure luck. Not even the music is as catchy. Honestly, this one is just there. Is that why this one was the first one not to release outside of Japan? Finally, we have Super Bomberman 5, the last of the Super Bomberman games. Well, before Super Bomberman are. Released on the 28th of February, the game had two variations, a standard cartridge and a gold cartridge produced in association with Koro Comic. I talk about the differences between the two, but I unfortunately don't have enough time. Maybe later. The story is that the evil Terrorin just show up on a normal peaceful day of Planet Bomber, entering the Bomber Penitentiary. I just realized they really like shoving Bomber onto everything. And release the Fiendish Bombers from their cell. Okay, where's security? Aren't they security guards that are supposed to make sure this doesn't happen, or did they all just have a lunch break? The Fiendish Bombers agree to help out Terrorin take over the universe on the conditions that they gain their freedom. So it is once again up to White Bomber and Black, if you're doing co-op, to put a stop to this along with their Rui companions. The graphics received a considerable makeover, and it looks way more vibrant and colorful than 4. White Bomber has a new set of sprites more accurate to the Bomberman art that were being used for the box art and promotional material of the time. It's not exactly accurate, but it's got the spirit. The animations as a whole have been made a lot more smoother and lively. I still prefer what 3 was going for, but this is a huge step up compared to 4. What isn't a huge step up is the fact that the stages being revisited don't match with the characters in terms of style, so they stick out like a sore thumb. The game is non-linear, where 4 zones are available at the start, with the 5th one being the final one. Each time you complete a stage, you can either go to a previous stage or the next one. Each of the 4 zones are themed after a previous Super Bomberman game. It seems Super Bomberman 5 was designed to commemorate the 4-year anniversary of Super Bomberman. It'd make more sense if it was for 5 years, but I guess they wanted to go out on a bang. The level objective is simple. Defeat all the enemies and you can exit with the blue and go to the previous completed stage with the gold. The Rees are back, but they act much more like the different creatures from 4. having unique abilities, like one of them can use the trampoline to jump over one block, or the fat one can roll over with high speed, kinda like a certain blue hedgehog, so forth and so on. Honestly, I actually found them a lot more useful this time around. I still suck at keeping them alive though. I'm sorry! Oh, and trust me, you need the help because with how rancid the enemies in the regular stages can get, things can get pretty ugly pretty fast. At times it feels like they're almost trollless. Okay, that one interview with Elijah Wood does come pretty close.
About
Yes.
football hooligans. You play football? You kick? You kick balls?
But on top of the trollless enemies, you also get some of the most hardest bosses of all time. Not only are they strategically better than you, smarter than you, but they always seem to get the upper hand. Like the dog, for example, he plants mines that disappear to the naked eye for some reason. But one thing they all have in common is that, by God, do they love placing bombs, and lots of them. This unfortunately makes it so that the Fiendish Bombers are my least favorite set of bosses in the Super Bomberman games. But what about the music? Well, after being disappointed by 4's soundtrack, 5 picks up the pace and then some with some of the catchiest themes I have ever heard, like this one.
God damn, Jimmy. This some serious gourmet shit.
So in conclusion, while it's not perfect as a conclusion, for now anyway, it is pretty good. So those were the Super Bomberman games, and honestly, they're actually really underrated. I mean, sure, some turned out better than others, but for the most part, I'd say that these are way too overlooked and should be held up as much as the classics like Super Mario World or Super Metroid. But with that being said, how exactly would I rank them? Well, I would say 3, then 2, then 1, and then 4. That's my ranking from best to worst. This isn't what you think. It's cherry cola with strawberry slushy. Really delicious. But anyway, this was Joseph from Joseph World, and I'll see you guys next time.